Episode 237, Nature Always Bats Last. This is the Change Underground for the week ending 9th of November 2020. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. We must realise, I think, how little we know. Compared with 3.8 billion years of evolution, the no-till, no-dig farming is, at a scientific measured and data collected level, only about 60 years old. A major part of no-dig is the use of cover crops, and while they have been known about for much longer, the combination of ground covers and no-dig is a relatively newish thing. All this came to light for me whilst listening to an interview with a fellow by the name of Dwayne Beck, link in the show notes. A youngest son with no hope of receiving the farm at the time, he studied ag engineering. One of his first journal articles was published in 1964, covering his no-till PhD work from 1960 to 63. So he's been in the game for a long time, in human terms. It seems from listening to him that humility is one of his character strengths, especially humility in the face of nature. Today's title, Nature Always Bats Last, is a quote of his. He was referring to the fact that we can create all kinds of hypotheses around no-till, no-dig and biomimicry, but when push comes to shove, nature will always have the last word. He, and for that matter I, chuckled when he explained his meaning. There are so many variables in a teaspoon of soil, let alone across a garden, field or even a paddock. Knowing what to measure, what to change and where to look for explanations is fraught with difficulty. That is why in the last episode, number 236, I laid down the three guiding principles I've gleaned from regen, no-till, no-dig reading material and practical hands-on in the soil experiences I've accumulated. So just to restate those three principles: keep the soil covered, living plants are better than mulch, but mulch will do until things start growing, and diversity above ground leads to synergies underground between bacteria, fungi and a variety of roots. Point 3 jumped out when I was YouTubing across the interverse and came across the Sioux Reactor. This is a compost making machine and so much more. The classic hot pile is brown and green materials piled in layers, wetted down as each is placed into the pile. It is then turned from time to time to maintain heat and bacterial growth. The Sioux system uses thoroughly soaked wood chips in the video I saw, in a cylinder made from weed matting or something similar, set on a pallet to allow infiltration from below as well as through the weed matting. Before the chips are piled into this, perforated pipes are set upright in the cylinder, such that they are never more than 18 inches or say 45 centimetres between each other or the edge of the cylinder. The wet wood chips were then loaded into the cylinder and the pile left alone. A couple of days later, the perforated pipes were removed, allowing airways into and through the organic matter. Now this system will heat up, but once it drops down below 26 degrees or about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, about 100 or so compost worms, red wrigglers, were tossed onto the top and the pile was never turned. From what I can work out, the system does take longer to complete than the standard hot compost, but it is heavily laden with mycelia. Why? Because it's not turned. This gives the mycelia time to grow and stay intact. And this is apparently the great advantage of the Sioux system. The claims for the compost so made seem too good to be true. So I'll be building one in the next little while and we'll report back on the process and the end product. The other catchphrase to come from Dr. Beck's interview was a throwaway line that triggered a chain of thought. Organic farming is tradition, no-till is science. the no-till work being done around the world, the regenerative work too, are both pointing at a thing I've been questioning as a thought experiment so far in my own mind. Do we need to rotate crops? Surely if we set the soil up with the correct bacteria to mycelia balance, can we not grow the same crops in the same place? The way we do with apple orchards, for instance, or multi-species pastures. The rotating of crops may just be a tradition held over from when the farming systems included a year of fallow. That is, soil left open to the sky with no crops growing on it. The continual cropping idea is not just to grow the same thing year after year, but to do so in some sort of perennial cover crop. And the one I've seen work is clover. Now, the methodology in this system involved glyphosate to kill off 8 centimetre strips through the clover field, so you could plant maize into the dead clover. Now, I'm not going to use glyphosate, or on anything for that matter, but maybe a product like beta weed, side dressed with lime to balance the pH after the acetic acid has done its job, might work. Beta weed is just a relatively strong vinegar that's sprayed onto weeds to strip off the leaf's protective cover and allow the plant to dehydrate. It only works with at least 4 hours of sunshine, but it does work. I've tested it on the driveway weeds. And of course Fukuoka used flooding in his rice paddy to kill off his clovers for long enough to get the rice seedlings established. There is some form with this type of growing then. And equally, Fukuoka grew rice every year in the same paddy without rotations, so there may well be something to it. It's a bit late in the summer at this stage. Well, it's only spring, but it's a bit late now. And sourcing white clover is proving to be a bit of a pain, as its importation into Tasmania is subject to quarantine charges and prohibitions. Yet I have it growing in the pastures here, so it must be available somewhere, but as I say, too late for this year's growing season. I'll look to have some for next autumn and hopefully get it established over the winter. But back to the idea of organics as tradition. I'm certainly not attacking the organic movement. It was crucial in standing up to the tide of industrial ag that's swept the earth since World War II. I think it held a light for those looking for and needing another way, in inverted commas. Equally, the certification only tells consumers what wasn't done. No chemicals, no GMOs and so on. Maybe it's time to drag the organic movement kicking and screaming into the regenerative age. Maybe. I think so long as we all follow the regenerative principles above of no bare soil and the more diversity the better, whatever we call ourselves can be a matter of personal choice. And with that, let's remember to ensure our soil work will always decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.